Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of What Happened. Today we're diving into one of the most controversial and heartbreaking stories of 2026, a story that involves terrorism, citizenship, children caught in impossible situations, and a government's decision that has shocked the international community. We're talking about the Australian ISIS citizens crisis and specifically what happened on February 16, 2026, when 34 Australian women and children came tantalizingly close to freedom, only to have their hopes crushed in the most dramatic and unexpected way possible. This isn't just a story about policy or politics, it's about real people, real families, and real consequences that will echo for generations. So, what exactly happened when these Australian citizens tried to escape their nightmare in Syria? How did they get so close to home, only to be turned away at the last moment? And why has Prime Minister Anthony Albanese taken such a harsh stance that even international observers are calling it unprecedented? Let's start by understanding where this crisis began, because the Al-Roj detention camp in northeastern Syria isn't just any refugee facility. It's essentially a prison without walls, holding the forgotten casualties of one of the most brutal conflicts of our time. The Al-Roj camp houses approximately 2,200 people from around 50 nationalities, mostly women and children with alleged ISIS links. These aren't technically prisoners, most haven't been charged, but they've been effectively detained for over 5 years in this Kurdish-controlled facility. Conditions inside are horrific. Amnesty International documents systematic human rights abuses, including torture, gender-based violence, and what they call shocking cruelty. Many women were forcibly trafficked to ISIS territories. Many children were born there and know no other life. Among famous residents is Shamima Begum, the British schoolgirl who left London at 15 to marry ISIS fighters. Britain stripped her citizenship. She remains in legal limbo, previewing the statelessness awaiting others. For the 34 Australians in this camp, women and children from 11 families, life has been a daily struggle for survival in conditions that would be unacceptable anywhere else on Earth. Save the children? Australia describes these as innocent children who have already lost years of their childhood, but the Australian government sees them very differently. Now, here's where the story gets really dramatic. On February 16, 2026, these 34 Australian citizens were finally supposed to go home. It had been months, possibly years of planning. Male relatives had traveled all the way from Australia to Syria to coordinate their release. Camp officials say these family members had been working with Syrian authorities to arrange proper documentation and transportation. They even had what appeared to be temporary Australian passports issued specifically for this repatriation. Early Monday morning, the women and children packed their few belongings and boarded minibuses at Al-Roj camp. After years of detention, they were finally heading home. The plan was simple: travel from the camp to Damascus, Syria's capital, and then fly to Australia, where families were waiting to reunite with loved ones they hadn't seen in half a decade. Camp director Hakmieh Ibrahim watched them leave, telling reporters this was part of an ongoing repatriation process. The mood was described as cautiously optimistic. These families had been disappointed before, but this time felt different. This time, they had official documentation, family coordination, and what appeared to be governmental approval. For several hours, the buses made their way through Syrian territory toward Damascus. The women and children probably allowed themselves to hope, to imagine seeing Australia again, sleeping in real beds, eating proper food, and most importantly for the children, starting normal lives for the first time. And then, halfway through their journey to freedom, everything fell apart. Syrian authorities suddenly contacted the Kurdish escorts and delivered devastating news. Despite the temporary Australian passports, despite months of coordination, despite the family members who had traveled from Australia specifically for this purpose, there was no coordination made with the Damascus government. The buses were ordered to turn around immediately and return to Al-Roj camp. Camp official Rashid Omar described the scene to CNN. However, shortly after leaving, Damascus informed us that there are no coordination made, so they had to turn back to the camp. He added that camp officials don't understand why they were sent back, despite already holding temporary Australian passports. Imagine being on those buses. Imagine being a child who was finally heading to a country you might barely remember, only to be told you have to go back to the detention camp. Imagine being a mother who thought she was finally going to give her children a real chance at life, only to watch that hope disappear in a single phone call. But here's where the story takes an even more shocking turn, because when news of this failed escape attempt reached Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's response was swift and uncompromising. On Tuesday, February 17th, just one day after the failed repatriation attempt, Albanese appeared on ABC News and delivered what can only be described as one of the harshest statements any world leader has made about their own citizens. "We have a very firm view that we won't be providing assistance or repatriation," Albanese declared. Then he added the phrase that has shocked international observers. "As my mother would say, you make your bed, you lie in it." But he wasn't done. "We have no sympathy, frankly, for people who traveled overseas in order to participate in what was an attempt to establish a caliphate to undermine and destroy our way of life." When asked specifically about the children affected by this decision, Albanese acknowledged it was unfortunate that children are impacted, but insisted that Australia would provide no support whatsoever. He made it clear that even if these citizens somehow managed to return to Australia on their own, they would face the full force of the law and could be prosecuted under Australian terrorism laws, which carry maximum penalties of 10 years in prison. The international reaction has been swift and largely critical. Australia contrasts with other Western nations. The US, Germany, Britain, France, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, and Canada have all repatriated citizens from Syrian camps with structured legal processes. But Australia's approach became politically toxic after December 2025's Bondi Beach attack, where 15 people were killed by ISIS-inspired attackers. This reignited fears about ISIS sympathizers and made repatriation extremely controversial. Australia has actually repatriated ISIS-linked citizens twice before, in 2019 and 2022. But after Bondi Beach, public sentiment hardened dramatically. What changed wasn't the security assessment, but the political climate. There's also a legal dimension that makes Australia's position particularly harsh. In 2023, the humanitarian organization Save the Children Australia took the federal government to court, arguing that Australia had a moral and legal responsibility to repatriate these citizens. The federal court ruled against Save the Children, saying the Australian government didn't control the detention in Syria and therefore had no legal obligation to help. This court ruling gave the Australian government legal cover to abandon its citizens, but it hasn't stopped international criticism. Save the Children Australia CEO Matt Tinkler argues that regardless of legal obligations, there's still a moral imperative. These innocent children have already lost years of their childhood and deserve the chance to rebuild their lives in safety at home and to reintegrate into the Australian way of life. The situation becomes even more complicated when you consider that many of these women claim they were forced to travel to ISIS territory, and many of the children were born in Syria and have never known any other life. For them, Australia isn't just their legal nationality, it's a country they might not even remember. But the Australian government's position is that adult decisions have adult consequences, even when those consequences affect children. As Albanese put it, "These are people who chose to go overseas to align themselves with an ideology which is the caliphate, which is a brutal, reactionary ideology that seeks to undermine and destroy our way of life." The international implications are significant. Assad's 2024 collapse created uncertainty about detention camps. Syria's new government is pushing Kurdish forces out of areas including detention facilities. UN experts have called on 50-plus countries to urgently repatriate foreign nationals in detention. The US has pressured allies to bring citizens home, both for humanitarian reasons and because camps represent security risks. Australia's position essentially creates stateless people. While these individuals retain citizenship technically, they're denied practical means of exercising it, citizenship in name only. The question remains, what happens next? Will family members try again? Will Syrian authorities eventually approve departure? Will Australia change position? Or will these citizens remain trapped indefinitely? What's clear is that Australia's "if you make your bed, you lie in it" approach is creating a precedent that other countries are watching closely. If wealthy, democratic nations can simply abandon their citizens in foreign detention camps, what message does that send about the value of citizenship and the responsibilities of statehood? This crisis also raises broader questions about how societies should handle the families of people who join terrorist organizations. Do we punish children for their parents' choices? Do we believe in rehabilitation and reintegration, or do we write people off entirely? How do we balance security concerns with humanitarian obligations? The Australian ISIS citizens crisis represents all of these dilemmas in their starkest form. It's a story about terrorism and citizenship, about children and consequences, about political calculations and human costs. And for 34 Australian women and children sitting in a Syrian detention camp right now, it's about hope deferred and dreams crushed by bureaucratic failures and political hardlines. So there you have it, the complete story of the Australian ISIS citizens crisis and the failed repatriation attempt that shocked the world, from the horrific conditions in Al-Roj camp to the dramatic near escape to Damascus, from Prime Minister Albanese's harsh response to the international backlash. This story has everything: human drama, political controversy, and moral questions that don't have easy answers. What do you think about Australia's approach? Should countries repatriate citizens with ISIS links, especially children who had no choice in the matter? Or is the security risk too great to take chances? Do you think Albanese's "you make your bed, you lie in it" philosophy is appropriate when children are involved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown of the Australian ISIS citizens crisis insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Stories like this involve complex legal, political, and humanitarian issues, and I'll be here to help you understand every development as it unfolds. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.